Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Radical Liberation from St. Louis, Missouri, United States. And I have with me, as usual, Mad Mercenary from Australia. Hello, sir.
Hello there.
And I feel like I should be calling him the hardworking Mad Mercenary. No need to go into details, but let's just say that his hands are not idle and they are not doing the devil's work, as far as I can tell. So that's good. We also have with us the wonderful guys from What the Fuck Happened in 1971. And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name. Your podcast name?
Bitcoin Echo Chamber.
Bitcoin Echo Chamber, where I think you particularly focus on security issues. Is that fair to say? Is that a theme or?
No, I would say more so we like talk about the monetary economics, but we try to touch on everything a little bit, technical, security, game theory.
So that's Colin, who also goes as by Heavily Armed Clown on various social media sites that still allow us to be there. And we also have Ben Prentice from this team here. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Red. How you doing, brother?
Okay, so last time we tried to do a lightning tour through, I don't know what to call it, the theory of what money is, the analysis of what money is and what different kinds of money are, as well as hitting on the history of it. Today, after we cover some smaller topics, we will now bring that to bear on a new phenomenon in the world. In fact, what's the year? I think we mentioned this last time. What's the official start year for Bitcoin, or the paper? When was the paper come out?
2009, I believe.
Oh, wow. That new. That's really new.
Oh, it's new. It's a baby.
Half my children are older than that. Okay. Yeah. So Bitcoin, a paper describing Bitcoin came out in 2009. And I guess Bitcoin as an actual virtual real thing was pretty much instantly after the paper, right? It wasn't like years.
A few months. It was 2010, I believe, when it launched, right at the beginning of 2010.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about something that's quite a new phenomenon. I remember being at the Mises Institute when probably 8 or 9 years ago, when this was still pretty new, and people were already presenting papers going, what is this thing? Is it money? So on and so forth. So people were puzzling over it right away. But we've had a little more time, a little more time for theorists to think about it, and of course, a lot of practical experience with it. So anyway, that'll be our main topic today. Did want to cover a couple other things and start with some very sad news for people who are into free markets, libertarian type stuff. And that is that the economist Walter Williams passed away just in the last day or two. I had it handy to share, but if you are interested to see someone who was a friend of his write about him, Thomas Sowell says that they were friends for half a century, and wrote a rather moving testimonial to Walter. And on this very show, I was waving around the book by Walter Williams, The State Against Blacks, now available for the cheap price of like $1,000 on Amazon.com. But his book, The State Against Blacks, is, as I was saying on Twitter, preceded all the Black Lives Matter stuff by decades. And not only that, but I suspect that if you read The State Against Blacks by Walter Williams, you'd have a much better diagnosis of what actually has been afflicting Black Americans, and probably a better idea of how to actually help Black Americans. I don't think I'm going out on a limb too much to say that BLM ultimately probably will not help the Black Americans that I know and care about very much at all. In fact, might make things worse. So anyway, Walter Williams, rest in peace. Okay, next, let's see. Let's share my screen and hit a few minis, as we like to call them. Okay, this is, oh boy, this one, I think. Go. All right, so Yeah, I shared this. In fact, there's probably a better link for this, but let me go ahead and just share this to the chat. Sorry, I need to get to the right chat. There we go. Okay, so this is a report done by some friends from the Deplore Discord, which the show is named in honor of. And it's called In Gold We Trust. And it is, I think, of interest to everybody, even people who aren't 100% fans of gold, like our guests, which maybe we'll get to that later. But it is very interesting. In particular, I wanted to highlight this chart. Or I'm sorry, their report is out. A special report on inflation is out. And this, I believe, is, I should know this. I think the gold line is gold. Oh, yeah, gold. And what is TIPS? I should know this. TIPS. Anybody know?
Yeah, that's the inflation protected securities, I believe.
Inflation protected securities.
Yes, they're treasuries that are inflation adjusted.
Oh, okay. I see. So this is like, you could say this gives you, in a sense, the official read on inflation, and the gold gives you the sort of a market indication of inflation. Is that a reasonable way to characterize those two measures?
Sounds right.
Yeah, and so you can see they're not always together, but they're sort of roughly tracking. And right now, they're both heading up in 2020. In fact, from the bottom there in 2019, it looks like they've headed up rather steeply in what, 2 years? In about 2 years. So what could possibly go wrong? But anyway, I thought it was interesting to highlight the inflation story here, but more so to point you to In Gold We Trust. They do a lot of charting. Oh, that's interesting. One of their sources is Reuters Econ. Anyway, they do a lot of charting, and they present information from a, I guess, money perspective. I guess it's fair to say. So wanted to bring your attention to that. I put the tweet in the chat if you would like to see that. In fact, let me make sure that's working because I actually put it in StreamYard, so I don't know. Oh, great. Excuse me just a sec to get myself rejiggered to make sure I'm seeing the chat. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So I can paste in StreamYard and it shows up in YouTube. Great. Okay, so that's that. Now, I just want to highlight this article. So this is just from earlier this week on Mises.org, on the Mises Wire, which is their sort of front page articles. And link is in the chat. And they are talking about digital currency. So you could say that these things are, in a certain sense, Ben and Colin, they are in a certain sense similar to Bitcoin. I'm trying to be very cautious, but from a certain squint point of view, you could say there's similarities to Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. I mean, these things are fascinating because, so one of the most interesting things about Bitcoin is that it's completely open source, right? So anybody can read the code at any time. So there was a white paper that was released in 2009. That's what we're talking about, that explained the ideas behind it. So let me know when the white paper and the open source comes out for the central bank digital currencies, and then I'll be interested.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so there, no shocker coming from people like us. We're going to be pretty suspicious of central bank moving into digital currencies, right? Having said that, as Ben indicated, there's room for real analysis, and here's some on Mises.org. And just to show you that this isn't what do they call it these days? Right-wing conspiracy theory. I think that's what reality often gets referred to.
We're all conspiracy theorists now, Brad.
Yeah. This is the right way.
They called it, all of us.
They called it the reality-based community. Remember this? This is back in the Clinton years. We're in the reality-based community. Yeah, I guess we're in the right-wing conspiracy theory-based community or something. Anyway, just to show that this is not just crazy talk, look at what Mad Mark found. This is on a site called ECB, looking at the URL, ecb.europa.eu. I believe this would be an official European Central Bank website. And here's a report on a digital euro from the European Central Bank. So we haven't gone through the details of this. We're not planning to do that today. And in fact, I believe this is a plan, right? Not something that they've done. Yeah, this is a plan, not something they've done. Go ahead.
Yeah, Brad, I was going to just jump in on this whole thing. I mean, it's not just the EU, right? So China is kind of launching something. The Federal Reserve has been talking about some kind of Fed coin, and it's kind of starting to become a narrative everywhere. And it's really interesting because a lot of our dollars and our euros are already digital. So the question that we should be asking ourselves as as market participants is what are these things offering that's over and above what we already have, which is digital fiat currencies. They're still going to be digital fiat currencies. They're not going to be decentralized. They're not going to have hard cap supplies. They're probably not going to be censorship resistant. They're not really going to be interesting. They do have some new qualities though. Probably one of which is the fact that they can take money in and out of your bank account at whim. Like for example, negative interest rates. These things make negative interest rates possible if they eliminate cash. So that's kind of a dystopian. That's why it's interesting to talk about them, because I think it gives them even more control than they already had. But it certainly won't be open source, like I said. So
I would also add,
So it is an interesting piece in the ongoing story we've been following on this show since we started it, I think, of the war on cash. Right. It's another chess move in the war on cash, you might say. But go ahead, Colin.
I would also add that there's the important implication of the legal protections granted by legal tender. Whereas, what makes Bitcoin unique, I guess you could argue what makes all cryptocurrencies unique, but Ben and I tend to focus on Bitcoin primarily, is that they're free market currencies. Any currency issued by a central bank is going to have the attached authority of legal tender, much to the chagrin of the chartalists out there who want to say that all money must come from a government because governments are all knowing and good and know what's best.
Right. Okay, so we're not going to go into an analysis of central bank currency on this show. I'm not even sure if that's a direction I feel ready to go right now, because it sounds like it is they're making plans, but they're not they don't have a launch date for the digital euro or whatever, right? So I guess I'd want to wait until it's a little closer to being real. Go ahead, Medmer.
Well, the reason I'm highlighting this report is twofold. First reason is that they were talking about this sort of stuff back in early 2020 when coronavirus was all hitting, and they were thinking about locking everyone down. So they thought, okay, cashless society stops the spread of coronavirus. Obviously, these sorts of things were happening before, like 2019, 2018, before coronavirus even hit, but it's been accelerated due to current situation. And the second reason I wanted to bring this up is that we've done a show on the reasons stated that people want a cashless society. We went over the reasons such as it reduces crime, it makes it easier to transfer funds, it's more convenient, these sorts of reasons. And we did a show on the war on cash. So if people after this stream want to go have a look at that, we did a very good analysis on as to why a lot of these reasons are smoke and mirrors, and the real reasons are more to do with, as Ben was saying, interest rates and negative interest rates.
In fact, I'm going to just pop that in the chat. Thank you for bringing that up, Mad Merc. That's our episode where we address the war on cash. Yeah, and the negative interest rate thing. Oh, wait, that's a separate episode, right? No, I'm sorry. We did it in one episode, war on cash and negative interest rates. So yeah, that if you're interested in both why they say they're doing it and why we think they're really doing it, then I think that episode I just put in the chat is going to be of great interest to you. Okay, so not a terrible segue to talk about. I'm sorry. I just want a quick rabbit hole. So I'm in IT. I'm in that. That's my career for decades, and and I'm sure it happens in other areas as well, but I'll just speak from my own experience. You have this buzzword fad thing, right? So in software, suddenly everything is agile, here's my agile word processor or whatever, or everything is, this is going way
cloud-based.
Yeah. Cloud. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. This is our cloud spreadsheet or, whatever. They just start slapping the buzzword of the day on everything. So in some ways, I feel like there's a little bit of, I think it's more nefarious than this, but in part, I think there's a little bit of, here's our, Bitcoin-like thing, it looks like the kids are into Bitcoin. So we're gonna try to like, jump on that bandwagon in some fashion.
Yeah, that's actually kind of already dying down. That was mostly in 2018, where like every business in the world was like, if we add blockchain to our name, and like there are literal examples of like completely, like I can't remember the company, but completely has nothing to do with anything finance or anything, adding blockchain to the name and the stock just like soaring. It's kind of like the 1999 2000 .com bubble. It's like, oh, some kind of technology thing's happening. So yeah, definitely the buzzword was blockchain for sure, and it's kind of already dying down because they realized that blockchains are really only good for one thing: a decentralized money that is set to overthrow central banking.
Well,
that's interesting. So, because I had heard people talking about blockchain for identification and stuff like that, and you're saying you guys aren't seeing that really go on anywhere.
That's a terrible idea. But it's like what the company Ben is referring to changed its name from Long Island. I think it was a Long Island iced tea to Long Island blockchain. And their stock went up. I think it was like 1,000%. I think it was a penny stock though when it happened.
Right.
In regards to the blockchain thing, Rad, you might be able to speak to this a little bit. I mean, I don't know. This is maybe more of an engineering thing, but like the heads, the bigwigs come and say, all right, we need a new system. It needs to have these parameters. We need it to do X, Y, and Z, but we want to use blockchain. And the engineers are like, you want to use blockchain? Okay, sure. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll create this for you and we'll use blockchain. And then they kind of nod and smile at the heads and say, okay, yeah, we're going to get right on that. We're going to create a blockchain system for you for this. And then really what it is it's no different than a regular, it's run on like a MySQL or something like that.
It's an append-only database, right?
Right. Yeah. I actually, what you're making me think of, Colin, is not my own experience precisely, but just Scott Adams with Dilbert. I mean, this is the pointy-haired boss, right?
Yeah.
He makes fun of it, but the reason, in case people are not in this world somehow, the reason Dilbert is funny is because some of us, I won't name any names, send ideas into Scott Adams from our real work life, and then he turns them into strips.
Looking at you, Rad.
Yeah, and what he always says is, don't send me jokes. I'll take care of the jokes. That's my job. You just tell me real life stories of what ridiculous thing is going on. I'll figure out how to turn it into a 3-panel funny thing. So yeah, that's Scott Adams. I actually saw his desk. It just so happens where he used to sit at Pac Bell out in California, and because a friend of mine was working there at the time, and he had, even back then, he hadn't been working for some years. They'd finally let him go after years of him doing Dilbert while also working for an IT company. People probably don't even remember that anymore. But for a lot of those years of the Dilbert strip, he was still in it. And they finally let him go, and they're like, go do your Dilbert thing. But he keeps it going. He keeps it grounded by having people feed him, so he can keep up with the cloud trend or whatever, and work that into the strip. Go ahead, Colin.
Saifedean, the author of the book that you had pulled up a minute ago, yes, has a really good analogy here. And I obviously, you need to be careful with analogies because they don't often best represent, especially new technologies. But I think his example is akin to like blockchain is the invention of the airplane wing. Right. I mean, everybody, the airplane gets invented and everybody suddenly says airplane wing technology is going to revolutionize car travel. totally discounting the, in this analogy, Bitcoin is the airplane, right? It's the new thing. It's the killer app, but everyone is distracted by all of the implications of airplane wing technology and all the things that those wings can be applied to. When, if you take a 1,000-foot view of that problem, you're going to see that the airplane wing is really only useful in its very specific circumstance for which it was created, which is in this case money.
Yeah, so it's good to hear you say that, because I don't know, I'm not knowledgeable enough. I heard some people talking about, hey, we'll use blockchain for this and that, and I thought, oh, I don't know, maybe. And you guys are saying you've looked into it and not really looking very promising.
It's yet to be seen. So really, with anything in, a lot of these projects that sound really great, like issuing diamonds on the blockchain or designer handbags or voting records or medical, like all of these things.
Votes, yeah, I've heard blockchain voting, that'll fix the election system. Yeah,
right. In a mutable distributed database is really only, you're always going to have this problem. Anytime you're trying to track something in meat space, you have what's called the oracle problem, where there's always going to be some trusted third party that's relied upon to take that data from the analog and move it to the digital. And so if you think about it that way, like if you think about it in the sense like, okay, I have this designer handbag that was produced in my factory under my brand name, and I've tracked it with a little RFID chip and entered all that information on the blockchain. Well, it still has to get to its destination, and just because that information is on the blockchain doesn't change whether or not that bag is swapped with a fake at some point along its supply chain, or whether or not it was actually, you can lie, right? People can lie. I know that's a shock probably to a lot of your viewers, but it doesn't solve the oracle problem. It doesn't solve the digitization of information problem.
So this is maybe jumping ahead to talking about Bitcoin, but or well, we're heading towards that, but it sounds to me like, I'm thinking like a programmer here. So a lot of these schemes were basically like, we'll have a pointer from the blockchain pointing off to a vote or a person, an identity or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Somehow the blockchain will protect these pointers. But actually what blockchain is doing with Bitcoin is that the pointer there is no pointer. The thing in the blockchain is the Bitcoin.
You've got it. Actually, this is what I was going to touch on.
That's the key. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a native token, right? And the other part of that kind of finishes what Colin was talking about is that the incentive problem, right? So that the reason why there are hundreds of thousands of people mining Bitcoin around the world with tons of computing power and all these things, putting all this computing power into it, right, is because there's an incentive, and that incentive is the native token of the network, and the network can give that native token, right? So this is actually part of the reason why I think there are such an explosion of so many scam coins and altcoins in the space, is that in order to have a blockchain, which blockchain is the buzzword, everyone wants to make a blockchain, is you need a native token, right? So now there are all these native tokens flying around, and we, as having had a lot of discussion about the origins of money and what gives things value, we've understood that these monetary networks, they need to accrue a large network effect, and they need to have certain assurances. And we obviously are going to make the case that Bitcoin is probably the only one that's really contender to be a money, and therefore, really, what is the value of those other tokens? And if you're, for all those blockchain applications, it's laughably bad. But really, what those people are looking for is an append-only database, right? Which can be done without, spending hundreds and thousands of dollars, millions of dollars on computing power to secure those blockchain, the append-only databases.
Well, and real quick, I would say, a lot of these blockchain ideas, these $1 million ideas, they're what I would call low value use cases. Things like, digital pet collecting, or, in a lot of cases, gambling. Like people call it decentralized finance. So you can call it all kinds of different things. But we've seen a lot of examples of those things blowing up in the participants' faces and people losing fortunes, at the snap of a finger. These are what I call low value use cases. And that's not for me to say that they're not valued by market participants, because obviously they are to at least some degree. If there wasn't demand, they wouldn't be being created. But they're low value use case in the grand scheme of things when you compare it to a monetary system that's securing the value of millions, maybe billions of people around the world. That's a high value use case, right? So what's happening with a lot of these blockchains is that they're starting out to do things like let you to track bananas or whatever, and then they don't scale well enough to handle essentially these blockchains end up getting priced out, particularly the proof of work blockchains end up getting priced out of their low value use cases and have to sort of transition to the high value use case, which is always going to be money. The highest value use case for this technology is money. And all of these tokens end up becoming competitors in the monetary sphere and are competing against Bitcoin as money. And simply objectively speaking, Bitcoin is the best cryptocurrency at being money just because of a number of factors, the nature of its creation and on and on and on.
We want to come back to make that case shortly. I'm determined to not leave irrelevant things up on the screen the whole time. I'm saying this out loud so everyone can help me. But this is not irrelevant. I wanted to mention this real quick. I was hoping to zip through the book between last show and this show, and I just wasn't able to. I read some of it. But I did want to pitch Saifuddin's book here. Saifuddin Ammous. I actually listened to him say his name like 5 times so I could try to get it roughly right. Okay, so Joseph Salerno is someone I've mentioned on this show quite a bit. He's someone I know personally and have known for years. And he is, in a certain sense, kind of the heir of Rothbard. In this sense, Rothbard was a man of many colors, you might say, right? He was a political theorist and an economic historian and so on and so forth. But his sort of core in a lot of ways as a scholar was being an economist. And if you have to find somebody who's really following his footsteps and trying to advance the Rothbardian program of economics, which is Misesian economics, right? But with Rothbard's additions to it, it's really Joe Salerno, as far as I can tell. So not only do I sort of mention, not only do I sort of endorse him in that way, but I would just say that I personally have listened to Joe explain things many times at the Mises Institute. And when it comes to money and banking, I personally tend to find that a more difficult topic. But when Joe talks, it's like things start clicking and I start getting it. So not only does he do important scholarly work, but one of my tests, a physics friend of mine, a physics researcher that I worked with, he said, if someone can't explain what they're doing to the layman, they don't really understand what they're doing. And he said, and I don't care if you're a theoretical physicist and you're doing string theory, you ought to be able to break it down and explain it to somebody. If you can't get out of the jargon and break it down to somebody, then you really don't really understand what you're doing. And so that's part of the way that I see how sharp Salerno is that he can break things down that are starting to go over my head, and I start getting them because he really understands what he's talking about when it comes to monetary economics and banking and things like this. So I said all that to read the endorsement that Saifuddin has on his website for this book by Joe Salerno. And this makes me take this book really seriously. And then I want to give my own brief endorsement based on the small amount of reading I've done. Joe said, I've spent my entire career studying works about monetary theory, the gold standard, comparative monetary systems, central banks, and proposals for monetary and financial reform. I would rate a tiny fraction of the books I have read about any one of these topics as excellent. Dr. Ammous's book, The Bitcoin Standard, contains an excellent treatment of all these topics, in addition to one of the few enlightened and enlightening accounts of Bitcoin that I have come across. It is essential reading for anyone interested in learning the role Bitcoin could play in a future regime of free and sound money. So this is a kind of a double endorsement here, right? Because what Dr. Salerno is saying, if you listen carefully, is you could read the first, I forget how much of the book, it's like half to 2/3 of the book, before he really is focused on Bitcoin. And he could give you a tour de force education. And it's not that long of a book. It's like 230 pages or something. Give you a tour de force education in all those things that Dr. Salerno just mentioned. And in fact, I'll just say them again real quick. Monetary theory, the gold standard, comparative monetary systems, central banks, and then proposals for monetary and financial reform. So he's saying you could read this book and not care at all about Bitcoin, and you would find value on these other topics. So that is an amazing endorsement. Then on top of that, he says, also, it's the best treatment he's seen of learning about Bitcoin. So that's 6 topics that he's saying this is the book to turn to. So that is a stunning endorsement. The only thing I would add as someone who just got into the first beginning of the book is that I found it highly readable. Now, to be fair, I've been reading Austrian economics for a couple decades now, so I'm a geek in this area, right? But for what it's worth, I am quite sensitive to how readable something is. You know, like could a layman, an intelligent layman, find this approachable? I found it very approachable. He's great, as the guys mentioned last time. He's great on bringing in the history of money, and as you can see from the cover, he's got the RAI on the left. Am I saying it right? The RAI,
yes. Yep.
The big stone money, right? He's bringing in some of that history of different kinds of money that we were talking about on our last show. He's bringing that into it, which I think brings some sort of color and some fun to the story, right? So it's not all sort of dry, abstract theory. He's talking about how money has functioned in real life in history. So anyway, I just think it's great. I don't want to go on too long, but you guys want to comment briefly just about the book?
Yeah, we'd love to, obviously. This book definitely changed a lot for me because I was trying to understand the economics piece and understand, as a monetary device, what the implications were. And what SAFE does, as you already mentioned, is he spends over half of the book talking about the history of money, which maybe your viewers might have a better idea than the average person. But really, as a society, we just, it was completely eye-opening to me. I've gotten down this whole rabbit hole because of Bitcoin. And when I found this Bitcoin thing and people were saying, oh, it's the money of the future and all this stuff, and you can transfer it around and that's good because it's censorship resistant and there's authoritarian regimes, that's great. And then it's like, well, but it's deflationary and deflation's bad. And you have to really understand what the heck you're talking about. And Saifedean does that by showing you the history of money. And I believe we mentioned this on the last stream, maybe. Yeah. Nick Szabo's Shelling Out is a more expanded version of that history of money, which if you really understand how money is an emergent market phenomenon, it just happens. It happens in any market economy where there's scarcity and there's any kind of specialization. Money just exists. It just emerges. And in understanding the story of these different monies and how they rose and fell is the key to understanding how, what makes a good money and what makes a bad money. And you need that in order to verify whether or not Bitcoin seems like a viable solution for the future. And then, of course, Saifedean spends the rest of the book going through some of the implications of bad money and then going through Bitcoin. And I think being very fair about it, he even goes through, he has a whole section on how to kill Bitcoin. And he has instructed the governments of the world that if you'd like to kill Bitcoin, all you have to do is stop printing money. And that would basically really castrate this movement, because a lot of the real value, I think, comes from the fact that you can't make more Bitcoins, right? So if they just stop printing dollars and euros, Bitcoin would be really hobbled along. So
right, great. And we'll get to that chart, that comparison chart between Bitcoin and we could bring that back in, right? Like, what if these negative signs or negative marks, again, those knocks against fiat money were eliminated because they started doing more sounder money? Where would that leave the competition at that point? I mean, we don't think that's going to happen, but anyway.
Right. But yeah, if you wanted to beat Bitcoin, that'd be how you do it. Because the honest truth is that gold has more proven history. Gold has more Lindy. But the central banks won't allow it. We won't ever go back to a world under a true gold standard, where payable upon demand, where specie is payable upon demand. That will never happen. And if you think it's going to happen, you're deluding yourself.
In like post-apocalyptic scenario, right?
Yeah,
like
maybe
like the postman scenario or something like that, right? Where basically it's there is no trusted, government anymore. Like it's basically anarchy, and it's you're out there on the the Mad Max kind of scenario, right? But yeah, as long as we have these ever centralizing governments who always want to inflate, they're going to keep this game going if they can, right?
And I will say, Safe
we
is a
can only
friend
dream.
Oh, sorry. Safe is a friend of Ben and I, so obviously, we're prone to our biases in regards to this book. But I would say Ben and I are both fairly well-read Austrians, and Safe is a very well-read Austrian. He teaches, or at least he used to teach, Austrian economics at the graduate level, or certainly at the collegiate level. I'm not exactly sure at what level. And now he sort of does online lectures for anybody who wants to learn from him via his website. So we're of the opinion that so few people understand Bitcoin because in order to understand Bitcoin, you need to be a well-read Austrian, and you need to understand Bitcoin, the technology, and Safe was one of the few people who sort of had the skill set necessary to put those two pieces together at a point in time when the rest of the world was very distracted and confused about what this technology actually was and what it was supposed to do. So I would echo Celestro, right?
Salerno.
Salerno's words as far as his endorsement goes for both Ben and me.
One other thing I already picked up on, and I bet he does more of it later in the book, but even early in the book, and this is something that I think fits in with the theme of this show. So it's just sort of foreshadowing a direction we might go at some point with some of our episodes, is that he says, really looking at the rise and fall of money in various historical settings is a really interesting key for understanding the history. Now, I think in the section I'm remembering, I think he was talking about the Roman Empire and this the Byzant. Didn't he get into that?
Byzantine.
The Byzantine money.
Yeah,
which just went on forever, and to some degree today is still recognized as valuable, having value. But anyway, he uses this as sort of a key to unlock. He doesn't go into it deeply, right? Because it's not a book of history, but he's basically saying this is not a bad focus if you want to try to understand certain aspects of history, is to look at the currency. And the other example he gave, which was just fascinating, this is a whole new light on colonialism. You guys talked about it last time, right? Which is the coming in with the glass beads, where glass beads were the money in Africa, say, and you come in, you buy up the glass beads. You come in with a bunch of glass beads because you can produce them cheaply, and basically buy up the whole place, right? I think what I was getting a hint in his book here is that happened more than once. Now, maybe not quite as dramatically as the Europeans coming from Africa, but there have been other cases where the people with the harder currency end up having an advantage, shall we say, a competitive advantage when they run into a group of a softer currency.
Right. And that's sort of like, there's some people in your chat basically saying, Bitcoin isn't the problem. I have with Bitcoin is that I can't take it to the 7-Eleven and use it to buy a candy bar. And I sympathize with that, really, because you have to live, you have to feed your family, you have to pay your bills. But you have to put it in the greater historical context as far as the consequences of holding a softer money than the greater global consensus. When that consensus shift, it often happens very fast. If you had lived in one of these societies, you'd pick any number of them throughout history where the social consensus within that isolated society was that money was feathers or seashells. Nobody is going to accept gold in trade because gold is not money. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't have benefited disproportionately from holding gold rather than feathers or seashells if you had been privy to the knowledge of monetary economics, right? So we're not telling you that just because Bitcoin is a superior money to the dollar means that you're going to be able to go and use it at a 7-Eleven tomorrow. These things take time. The transitions often take a little bit of time, but when they happen very quickly. And we're in the business of trying to position ourselves for these types of paradigm shifts.
Right. Yeah. So as you say that, what comes to mind? I'm picturing the hyperinflation in Germany after World War I, right, with the famous wheelbarrows full of German marks to buy a loaf of bread or whatever. Well, okay, let's say you're in that scenario. You're in a hyperinflation scenario, which has happened in our lifetimes, like in Zimbabwe and I think Venezuela currently, right? You're in a hyperinflation. Yeah, you're in a hyper scenario. And let's say that even in that hyperinflation scenario, people don't want to accept your gold or your Bitcoin directly. They're just not equipped. But each day, the whole idea of a hyperinflation is the prices are changing like daily. They're noticeably changing from day to day. Like better to buy that loaf of bread today than tomorrow if you can, because the price is gonna go up in the hyperinflated currency tomorrow. So imagine having gold or Bitcoin or some sounder currency that you can exchange for, very, very carefully, right? Exchange for just what you need to go out and buy your bread for the day. So you exchange your 0.0001 of a Bitcoin or whatever for your wheelbarrow full of German marks. You buy your bread, and then the next day you exchange a little bit more for an even 2 wheelbarrows to buy the next piece of kind of bread, right? But the point is you're in a position. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Please. I'm imagining this scenario. Talk to me.
I have multiple contacts in Venezuela, like right now. I know these people, and they. Not everybody in Venezuela is doing this, right? But a lot of people are. Venezuela is weird because the government of Venezuela launched their own shitcoin called the Petro coin. So
this is a digital.
Yes, though, like almost it was completely a scam, like even more than most altcoins, because like you could never even withdraw it. There was no wallets or anything. They just like sold it, right, just to get more money from their citizens. But the citizens have kind of a distrust of these things because of that scam. But I know of a bunch of them that are using this directly between each other. But mostly what is the exact situation you're describing. They get paid. And what every Venezuelan does is when they get paid, they go buy all the stuff they need for the week. Just go buy all the stuff you need for the week. Don't hold any cash, because by next week, the cash is essentially worthless, right? And next week you'll get paid 3 times as much as you were describing. So these people instead, the ones that are into Bitcoin, will go buy some Bitcoin, and then when they need to make a purchase, they will trade it. And they don't have as many options for trading as we do in some of the Western societies. What they do have are these peer-to-peer trading, people on the street that might be trading. And it's funny because people are like, oh, well, who would accept, bolivars for Bitcoin? Oh, it's like, well, the other side of the guy, the guy on the other side who just got paid, he needs to trade his back for Bitcoin. And so there's always this. So this is the idea of liquidity, right? How saleable is Bitcoin as a thing? And what Colin was getting at is some of the people in your chat were saying, oh, well, I can't go buy a copy of it. Sure. But if you go to Europe, if you go to Africa, if you go to China, and you look around and you find the right place, there's Bitcoin ATMs, there are these peer-to-peer services. Bitcoin is globally liquid, more than pretty much every government currency except the US dollar. It is more globally liquid than that. It isn't, there's maybe not as much merchant adoption. In 2017, 2016, all the Bitcoiners were saying, all we need to do is get all these, Amazon and Starbucks to start accepting Bitcoin, and then it'll be global money. But we realized that, gold is still a monetary device, right? We still store our wealth in it. It's $1 trillion asset with zero merchant adoption. So to say that, Bitcoin needs merchant adoption to have a store of value or to have a monetary characteristic is silly. And really, I think the big thing to frame this for your viewers is to understand that a money has never arisen this quickly. It's never happened in real time before. Monies usually take hundreds of years to arise, and certainly a digital money couldn't have existed before now. Not a truly, natively digital money. So that I would caution them to feel like they have already understood and dismiss this thing, because it is harder to understand than you can possibly imagine when you really start digging into it.
You're bringing back memories of my first time being in Europe, and 1987, doing a tour that my rich old grandma sent me on. Let's see, when did Euro start?
During the
Okay,
80s,
I see. Euro was introduced. Say it again.
I think it was during the 80s.
No. It was much later.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It says name was
Like
adopted then. The euro was introduced
1999.
an accounting currency in 1999. Physical coins entered in 2002. Okay, right. So I'm there in 1987. For you young folks, this is before the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union was still around. Okay, so I was only in the West because the East was kind of behind the Iron Curtain and all that, and we didn't want to deal with it. But I'm having memories of each time we would enter a new European country, we're all lined up at the exchange place,
Yep.
where they're
And each one of those, took their own cut. Oh yeah,
exactly. Yeah, we're losing a little each time we move from one currency to another, right? So you don't want to exchange too much into the currency that you're going to of a country you're going to be in for 2 days or whatever, right? Because we're going from country to country. You want to kind of exchange about enough of what you think you'll spend, and then when you hit the next country, what you didn't spend, now they're gonna get another cut as you switch to Swiss francs or whatever, right?
Right. And Rad, this is why I'm a monetary maximalist, right? This is why I decry all of the altcoins on the market, because I don't think they're liquid enough, and their existence kind of takes liquidity away from Bitcoin. But really, it's getting at the point that you're making here, is that when you were traveling amongst these countries, you really just had a crappier form of barter where you had to keep changing the monies over and over again. And that's what we have in the world today, even just forgetting about Bitcoin as itself, is we have all these different monies that when we're trying to transact across borders, we have to change them or use bankers' acceptances or use all these changing services. And it's really, it's not beneficial for the world. So what happens? What happens is the US dollar becomes a world reserve currency. The concept of a world reserve currency is the idea of monetary maximalism. It's the convergence of a society to use one money as a unit of account, right? And a medium exchange.
Right.
And there's a lot of bureaucratic waste. Oh, sorry,
you go ahead.
You have like a delay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sure it's not your fault. I'm sure it's the difference in locations, but you have a whole lot of bureaucratic waste in facilitating this exchange of government monies between people, between both international trade and tourism and travel. Trillions of dollars parked in Nostro Vostro bank accounts around the world, specifically there to provide liquidity in intercurrency exchange. The huge amount of waste, huge amount of rent seeking, huge amount of bureaucratic overhead, simply to protect the individual legal interests of each different nation state and its sovereign currency.
Okay, Mad Merc, go ahead.
Right. I just wanted to say, before we get into the nitty gritty, let's just step back a bit and step back to our episode that we first did and saying what is money and going through all the types of money. Yep. What exactly is Bitcoin in the Austrian theory of money? Let's just go through the fundamentals here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd love to try this one. But the best way to describe it is still way too poor. Words are labels, and we use the words as categorizations to try to, as Colin was mentioning, analogies can be useful. But Bitcoin isn't like anything that has ever existed before. And I think that's really important to stress, that it is, it doesn't translate well into our lexicon. If you were to do so, you would say it's a hybrid between a fiat currency and a commodity currency. The commodity part being it is a digital thing that is traded, but that part of it fails because a commodity has some other industrial use, right? And Bitcoin doesn't have any other industrial use. It is only a thing that you can move around, that you can't make more of. But on the other side of it, the fiat part of it, well, that one doesn't work either, because fiat is by decree. It means, literally, the translation means "let it be done." It is a decree by a government that this with this stamp I now decree this money works, right? So neither one works. So it is neither, right? So it is a revolutionary, first of its kind digital commodity that cannot be inflated. That's what it is. But when you try to explain that to somebody who understands money, they'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? So that's the best answer I can give you, unfortunately.
Well, but it's yeah, when you try to categorize, but if you look at it more from the point of view, which we'll get, tell me when to bring it up, but when you look at it from the properties of money point of view, right? Let's not try to put a label on it, but let's just kind of do it in an itemized way and do the properties of money. Then it becomes a little more obvious what's going on, right? Because it does have some of those properties that we were talking about last time.
It also has new ones that didn't exist before, right? Like decentralization. And censorship resistance and seizure resistance, right? Like gold doesn't have those things, and it doesn't fall anywhere on that scale because they're new, because they're part of this revolutionary new concept that we're trying to wrap our heads around, to be fair.
And the social construct of money more abstractly, right? And we sort of touched on this in the last stream. It is a ledger of exchange, right? A ledger of value, like, and that's why it's an evolution of barter, right? Because I have eggs, you have apples. I already have enough apples, but you need some of my eggs. So we need a way to solve that problem with the coincidence of wants without using eggs and apples, right? So we develop this external medium, which is highly liquid and highly desirable and preserves its value across time and space. And Bitcoin just so happens to be, a digitization of that ledger system, that transactional system of value. But it's new, it's pioneering in the way that until Satoshi came along, there was the problem known as the Byzantine generals problem, where you couldn't prove verifiably so that information digitally couldn't be replicated, that it could only be done once, and that couldn't be overwritten or double spent. And so Satoshi's unique contribution to cryptography and computer science and monetary economics was not the invention of some new technology, as people call it blockchain. Satoshi never even used the word blockchain. He called it a time chain, because all he was doing was time stamping events, and the collective distributed hashing power of the Bitcoin network contributes to this process of timestamping and ordering transactions in the order in which they're entered into the distributed ledger, right? And then they're immutable, essentially. Immutability is a difficult concept to. A lot of these concepts are very ethereal and they're very difficult to grasp. But immutable, virtually in a sense, digitally and distributed across the world, and so a digitization of the ledger system of money, if you will.
Okay, so let's try this. Let's try that checklist, if that's all right with you guys.
Yeah.
And try to kind of work our way back into how Bitcoin works.
Okay, there's a really good one inside of that PowerPoint.
That's what I'm going to do. The attributes of an ideal store of value, it says. So let's start from the outside, so to speak, right? Which is, you could talk about gold that way, right? You could say gold is a thing that is durable, and all that stuff. Oh, really? What is this thing? Well, it's this element in the elements chart, and it has these chemical properties, and that results in durability and so on and so forth, right? So let's start with the properties of Bitcoin, and then work our way inside to how it has these properties because of the way it functions.
Right. Do you want to bring it up for the viewers?
That's what I'm going to do. So
yeah, and this is from Vijay Boyapati's article, "The Bullish Case for Bitcoin," which is excellent. It's a good read. Give you a good overview of this kind of case.
I feel like that name is so familiar for some reason. I don't know why I would know it otherwise. But anyway, I have a lot of Indian coworkers. It might just be a familiar sounding Indian.
Yeah, formerly worked at Google, so maybe you two cross paths at some point.
No, I don't know Google people really. Okay, so I'll just show the title real quick, but then I to make it big enough, I can't leave it on the screen. The attributes of an ideal store of value, and this is from a set of what kind of a presentation sort of thing, right?
Right.
Okay, and so what we have then is in the leftmost column we have Bitcoin, in the middle we have gold, in the right we have fiat currency. It's interesting how low the marks are for fiat currency. It makes you wonder if he's being fair, because fiat currency is working as a money, but it's a very problematic money to be honest. From the point of view of those of us who are
like
booms and busts.
It's almost like these fiat fiat dollars are just pieces of paper backed by nothing.
Right.
Well,
Okay, so here's the properties real quick, and then I guess what we'll do is we'll go property by property first. How about that, guys? And talk about Bitcoin versus gold versus fiat for each property. And then, having explored these claims about Bitcoin, let's talk about how it could get such high ratings almost across the board here for these properties. Is that okay, guys?
So, I would caution us to maybe not necessarily go through every single one again. A lot of these are some of the things that we've covered in the previous episode. So durability, we may have mentioned. We certainly mentioned portability. We definitely mentioned fungibility, verifiability, divisibility. I remember spending a lot of time on, and scarcity, of course, is very important.
Well, then how about this? Let's talk about Bitcoin against these properties, because I specifically wanted us to not get into Bitcoin last time. I wanted us to kind of talk about money historically, sort of bring us up to 2009 or whatever, right? Like before Bitcoin existed, this is our understanding of the properties of money and fiat versus gold and all that. So how about we go through these just for Bitcoin then? Because we already discussed about gold being durable, for instance, which means not perishable or whatever. So it's saying that Bitcoin, he gives it a B relative to a gold's A+. Why does he give it a B rather than an A+?
Go ahead, Ben.
For durability?
Yeah.
No, Colin, take this one.
Okay, so I think that his reasonings here are twofold. Primarily, if you have gold or if you have fiat, right, these are physical objects, right? So I can take bars of gold and in my will, I can designate that gold be turned over to my heirs upon my death, and then that gold can be, custodied by my institution of choice, and then turned over to my next of kin upon my passing, and that's durable, right? That's preserved into the future. With Bitcoin, unless you take very specific steps to make sure that transfer is possible because of the nature of cryptography, right? If you don't hold the private key, you don't have access to the Bitcoin. And if that weren't true, Bitcoin wouldn't work, right? Bitcoin relies on cryptography to function. Therefore, you must have the private key in order to be able to transact. So in that sense, it complicates durability. And then on the other side of that token, knowledge of the private key must be preserved in some way, shape, or form. It can be stored digitally, right? But you always have the potential for bit rot. You have the potential for devices to fail. You can back it up on, say, a sheet of paper, but then again, it's not a whole lot better than a piece of fiat. Some people go as far as to etch their private keys into pieces of steel, or on multiple pieces of paper stored throughout various geographic locations. But I think that's where he was going in with durable.
Okay, so that's interesting, because what we would foresee, and I suppose it's probably happened already, is that somebody's put a good chunk of their net wealth into Bitcoin, and then they die, and no one is able to figure out the private key, and it's gone, right? I mean, effectively, those Bitcoins are just out of circulation.
We call those donations to the hodlers.
So you call it what?
Donations to the hodlers.
The hodlers?
So what he means here, let me translate. The hodlers are people that hold Bitcoin, and the donation is that by losing the money, that everybody else's wealth increase, the value of everybody else's increases because you've contracted the supply, essentially. So
right.
It's donation.
Okay.
It's sort of akin to gold sinking to the bottom of the ocean, but it's non-recoverable.
Right. And the other part of the durable thing is that, Bitcoin's only been around for 10 years, right? So will Bitcoin exist in 10 years? I think so. But, as a society looking at this thing, they're probably not sure of that. And that kind of goes down to the established history thing. You see, that's where we get our other very poor mark for Bitcoin.
Okay, so portability is really interesting because he gives it an A+. I agree under current circumstances, right? Which is to say, we have a worldwide internet that's distributed all over the place, right?
Right.
And so you can go anywhere, as you just pointed out, and you have carried Bitcoin with you as you travel the world, right?
Yes. And I think this is, I think I may have misunderstood your premise. I think we're doing this just as you said, and I think that's perfect. I thought you wanted to go through each one of these, the properties first all by themselves and explain all that again. No. So this is perfect. And actually, fiat is interesting here, right? So fiat's already digital, right? Over 80% of all money in the world is already digital, right? So it is very portable, but there's a big caveat here. And I've talked a lot of times about the Eurodollar University that's on a series of podcasts called Macro Voices, where Jeff Snyder, who is a very, very really well read on the banking system and how it really works, discovered the real problems with portable digital fiat is that the verifiability, which is another one of these. So you can see some of these things actually really like play off each other, right? The verifiability of fiat as being a portable global thing is not as much as you'd think it is. In fact, all these banks globally, we're using bankers acceptances, which are like these agreements between banks to like, that I will pay you for this. It was like a form of like credit or ledger money almost. And that actually ended up causing a whole bunch of inflation that was outside the Federal Reserve's control. So that's interesting. Also, you know, in order to move this digital fiat around, well, it has to go on one of these rails. And the digital fiat system is built in layers, but at the base of it is the Fed and the FedWire system and SWIFT, and then the banks have their own systems, and then these things clear, and credit cards are like another rail on top of that, and really like these things don't. They're not instantaneous, right? We think we see our PayPal dollars moving around really quickly, but the clearing houses take weeks sometimes to do some of these clearances. Some of it's overnight, some of it, they're really batched, and so it's not quite as portable as you'd think. Bitcoin, however, you can have finality after a few confirmations, which takes 20 or 30 minutes, depending on the size of the transaction. Which actually makes sense. For smaller transactions, you don't need a lot of finality. For a large transaction, you wait till there's a few more confirmations, and millions of dollars being settled within an hour globally, anywhere in the world. And that's
actually quite impressive,
right?
Yeah.
And that's forgetting about the second layer solutions that Bitcoin is using, which are
what's coming to mind is
right.
You might know about European Jews being big in the diamond industry. This had to do with networks of trust, right? Because moving diamonds around is no joke, right?
Right.
And so it could get very expensive if you had to, do a lot of security steps and stuff like that. Instead, basically, they were like relatives, more or less. Like it's my cousin in Amsterdam, and I can trust him, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect segue into gold. Why does gold get a D here? Do you know, Rad?
Because it's heavy.
So we spent a lot of time talking about on the stream with what's his name, King of Shagir, the unpopular opinion stream. That was a big 5-hour live stream we did with you guys about WTF Happened in 1971. We believe that the failure of gold is due to its lack of portability. That's why fiat won. Fiat won not by a lot. If you look at this chart, it got a B instead of a D for portability. But what happened to gold is it all ended up in these vaults, and we started using these certificates. And the reason we started doing that is because gold was too hard to move around and verify, and to divide and to recombine. And to store even, right? To like storing gold was harder than storing paper. And it was heavy, as you mentioned, right? So for all of these reasons, we ended up stopping using the gold. And this is crucial because gold's really only bad mark here, beside you can see the 2 C's and divisible and censorship resistant, is the portability. But I think that was the downfall of gold, and what allowed fiat, which is objectively a much worse money, as you pointed out on this chart. It allowed fiat to win with the help of the government, right? So if you want to learn more about how the government props up their fiat currencies, read the Ethics of Money Production, and he goes through legal tender laws, and a number of other things that the governments use to take the free market out of money, right? There isn't a free market of money.
But this is an important point. I'm not sure I've heard it before, which is that it wasn't, and it seems plausible to me, because stories that involve, like the creation of money itself, right? Stories that involve the state being able to just ex nihilo, everybody will use this as money. That's not plausible, right? And what you're saying is that the transition from using gold for transactions in a sort of regular basis to using notes that represented gold or something like that, right? Because of the portability thing, that at that point, sort of nothing wrong had happened, right? Nothing unjust, if you want to look at it from an ethical point of view.
In 1933, nothing bad happened. In 1933 and in 1971. 1933 was when Executive Order 6102, the U.S. banned the ownership of gold. And everyone was like, we already have all these pieces of paper. 1971, same thing. The U.S. ended the gold window, but we already had these pieces of paper. We're good.
And we touched on this.
Your point is not an ethical point, but just from a practical point. How could they do that? If we really were still reliant on exchanging hand-to-hand gold? Well, the reality is we weren't. And so that was just the last snip, an unjust snip, but the last snip of the last little connection to the physical gold, right?
And we touched on this in the previous stream that we did with you guys last time, where I had mentioned Rothbard's History of Money and Banking. Actually, I think Matt Burke had mentioned it, and I kind of expanded on what he was saying, where there's precedence throughout, particularly this phenomenon is the most observable in the United States monetary history, where originally all of these paper banknotes were redeemable upon demand for specie. And I call that settlement to the base layer. The base layer money was gold. But over time, fewer and fewer people were redeeming these banknotes for gold because the paper was just easier to use. And as you had series of induced financial crises in the United States, what the federal government did was suspend redemption of specie, suspend that settlement to the base layer, settlement from the paper IOUs to the physical specie. And no one wanted to deal with the specie anyway, so only the smart people cared, right? And the government made it illegal only for short periods of time here and there, for 100 years, for 200 years. And then in 1933, it all changed. But at that point, no one pushed back, right? Because, some people probably buried some gold in the field, but at that point, the precedent had already been set. It was common monetary policy practice for the federal government to ban the suspension of redemption of specie. And then in 1971, by the time Nixon closed the gold window, people didn't even think about gold as money anymore because it had been abstracted away from them for so long. And what makes Bitcoin unique here is that it is a new base layer of money, right? One that can be settled to without permission, one that doesn't require a reliance on a trusted third party to facilitate that exchange between the base layer and higher layers that help that base layer scale, right? Because gold doesn't scale. And that's what Ben is getting at when he says that those paper IOUs were necessary to solve those problems with portability and divisibility. Bitcoin can, if not able to scale at the base layer, can settle from higher layers that allow it to scale, very similar to how the internet works at higher layers. It's all done on a base layer that there's no way, we could watch these YouTube videos on the base layer of the internet. It all happens at higher layers. But Bitcoin can settle back to its base layer permissionlessly without trusted third parties.
Don't want to dwell on fungibility too much because it looks like the scores are very similar. But if you could just briefly explain, I'm surprised that Bitcoin didn't get an A+. The little I know about Bitcoin, I would think they're, 0.01 of a Bitcoin is the same as 0.01 of another Bitcoin. Right?
In 2012, when I first heard about Bitcoin, I thought it was an anonymous money. And I realized much later when I finally went down the rabbit hole that it's not. It's pseudonymous, right? Meaning pseudonym, meaning, I have a wallet and everybody can see on the blockchain. It's completely public and transparent that I have that Bitcoin, but they don't know necessarily that it's mine, right? And if somebody does figure out that it is yours, then everywhere I send it, there's the record of where it came from. And there's this idea that I mean, even the governments have already started making lists of Bitcoins that you can't accept, right? There's an OFAC list, I think, where a few hackers or something, or some criminals that had Bitcoin, that they basically blacklisted these Bitcoins. And
wow.
that is, and everybody knows where those Bitcoins are. They're on this address, right? They don't know necessarily who has them right now, but that it kind of hurts the fungibility. I agree with you that yes, each unit of Bitcoin is 100% fungible, but the UTXO where it sits, the unspent transaction output where it sits, that is not necessarily fungible with another one. But it is a problem that is being worked on, and is working on privacy and stuff like that too. So
the pleb enforcement says Bitcoin deboomed. Anyway, okay, so let's move on to the next one. I want to move a little faster. So verifiable, it gives it a very high rating, higher than both gold and fiat. We know that there has been counterfeit paper money, no question. It is. You can authenticate it, but I think some of it is good enough that most laymen would not be able to tell the difference between a counterfeit, a well done counterfeit US dollar or whatever, right? And then gold, well, it's not, again, if you have the right equipment, you can do it. But most people who are just trying to make a sale can't do it. But they're he's giving Bitcoin A+. So why is that?
Well, so there's precedence for this, right? Just recently, the Chinese discovered a huge amount of, I think it was tungsten-filled gold bars. And even governments, right, are fooled by this from time to time, where they expect that what they're receiving is gold. They might not test all of it. They might test only a certain percentage of it. And then, you find out at a later point in time that you've been defrauded on some end of an exchange or various exchanges. The interesting thing about Bitcoin is that every single individual user, with a very small amount of computing power and bandwidth, is able to run their own copy of the software, right? And through that copy of the software is essentially your access to the consensus of the network and a copy of the digital ledger. So all Bitcoin that you receive and all Bitcoin that you send, if you desire, can be filtered through your node. It's called a full node, fully validating node. Filtered through your copy of the ledger, and through that process, you can verify the authenticity of every Bitcoin, and every fraction of a Bitcoin that passes through your hands, with 100% totality.
And by the way, verify the rest of the entire supply schedule and make sure that no other rules have been broken, all without doing anything, effortlessly.
And it's very cheap.
Okay, excellent. So let's keep going then. Divisible. Now this is interesting. Okay, I see. Yeah, so that I'm going to try my shot at it, and you tell me if I'm not getting it right. Why is A+ on Bitcoin and a C and a B on gold and fiat? Because yes, you can take a gold coin, you can cut it in half, and you now have two pieces that are literally half the value of the original coin, in theory, right? Because from the point of view of like just the weight of gold, if you just value it as the weight of gold, it's not a collectible or something. But how many people are sitting around doing that? Whereas my understanding is to use Bitcoin, to actually use Bitcoin to purchase and to donate and so forth, is to divide it. I mean, basically you're dividing it all the time. And this is just the normal user Bitcoin divides it. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have special equipment. This is just part of using it every day, right?
And this is a problem that unfortunately a lot of people who maybe aren't as technically minded or not as exposed to Bitcoin fail to grasp. You hear it all the time. I can't buy Bitcoin. $18,000 is too expensive. You can transact, whatever you want to call it, as little as 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin is software and because it's open source, should that number ever need to be made higher, it is potentially possible. that could be done. And in regards to the gold thing, pieces of 8 were actually an eighth
Right.
of a gold coin. That's where that term pieces of 8
Literally
comes from.
chop the coin up. Yeah.
Right. And even that was less than ideal because it was still not divisible enough to solve for small expenditures.
Yeah, and if you tried to buy a pack of gum with a piece of gold today, do you know how big that piece of gold would be, Rad?
Right, I know.
I bet you do.
You'd lose it.
Yeah, it'd be a hair, right?
Right. Yeah, it'd be physically unmanageable because it'd be too small for our big human fingers, right?
Yeah, and just to touch on the fiat side of this, so how do you can you send somebody half of a cent? So already on the Lightning Network, so Bitcoin is about $18,000. That's divisible into 100,000 or 100 million units, right? And on the Lightning Network, they're already dividing those 100 millionths of a Bitcoin into sub Satoshis. So I can send somebody 0.0001 cents, right?
Okay, you just touched on one of my hot issues because I read that essay from gazillion years ago by Vannevar Bush or whatever, who was talking, I think I'm getting this right, who was talking about his vision for what the web would be, and we've never gotten there. And it's so frustrating because what we really want, we're getting a taste of it with Patreon and things like this, right? Subscribestar and so forth. What we really want is to go and listen, every time we listen to a certain song, the artist, the band, not the label, right? The artist gets 0.01 of a cent, or something that is just not going to hurt us. And we listen to music all month long, and we've spent a couple bucks or something, right?
Red, you might like to know.
Everybody giving them a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, you cut on. You lagged a little bit there. You might like to know Adam Curry, the father of podcasting, right? The guy who sort of really created a lot of these podcasting systems that we have today,
I know who he is,
really got it going. Okay, he is very excited about Lightning Network on Bitcoin and is working to integrate micropayments via Lightning into podcasting so that users can pay, per second or per minute or whatever it is that they choose to consume content and have that money go directly to the content creator without any middleman.
It's exactly what you were describing, Rad. It's happening right now. You can download an app called Sphinx. And he's got a vision for this too. It's not just, the podcaster. He's saying, maybe somebody in the podcasters community helped make the artwork for that episode. So they can just put a little tag in the pod so that person gets 2% of that podcast. And then, somebody contributes and the reason why this hasn't happened as you kind of lamented, Rad, is that it's a twofold problem. One, that we have all these barter currencies that we touched on earlier. I can't send euros to somebody. I can't send dollars to the people in Venezuela to help that artist. And on top of that, the system that we move digital fiat around is this closed, permissioned system there's no innovation, right? And it requires reversibility, which requires KYC, which we'll get into a little bit later in the episode. But that if I just want to give somebody 1 cent, right? And I want in the real world today, if I try to send them 1 cent, first of all, a credit card transaction can't go that low because the fee is like 30, 40 cents just for the credit card transaction. But on top of that, I'm sending this credit card transaction. I have to give them my credit card information, which is the information which they can take more money out of, right? So if I give them my credit card number so they can charge my account, they're pulling money from my account. So I can't just easily send these dollars around. I have to give them my password to take my money away, right? So it's not like a cash-like thing where Bitcoin, if I send it to you, I can't get it back. It's gone. But I also don't have to give you any other information about me. In fact, you may not know who I am. And that is literally not possible with the digital fiat system.
Right. Okay. Well, let's keep rolling. I'm trying to figure out if we're going to pull off doing the demo today or not. But anyway, scarcity. This is a really important one, and I think we've already kind of hit on it in our previous episode, so won't go on and on about it. But basically, why is fiat getting, the worst grade on here is fiat for scarcity, and that's absolutely true, because fiat currency gives us, as we already discussed, hyperinflations and stuff like that. And even if it isn't a hyperinflation, it's a slow bleed out of inflation. And what do we mean by inflation? The proper Austrian meaning or traditional meaning is that the money supply increases.
Yeah, and Neil
Right.
Kashkari from the
Now,
oh sorry, you lagged
gold
again.
and Bitcoin. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Neil Kashkari
Okay.
from the
Just real
Federal
quick. So
Reserve.
gold and Bitcoin. Yeah.
We're playing tag here. Neil Kashkari from the Federal
You.
Reserve said that he literally said on TV with wide eyes that I can make as much money as I want to. They can infinitely make money at zero cost.
Yeah. Right. So that's a problem for a money. It's a big problem. Oh yeah. So in the cases of both gold and Bitcoin, let's be very careful here. There isn't zero growth in the money supply. In the case of gold, there's gold mining. In the case of Bitcoin, I guess they call it mining there too, right? But there's a way to produce new Bitcoins. So in both those cases, there is growth in the money supply. But, and this is the wonderful concept that I'd never seen before in all my years of reading from Saifedean, the stock to flow ratio. So he's saying what you want is, yeah, sure, the money supply increases, but the amount it increases relative to the existing stock is small enough that it doesn't cause this terrible inflation problem, right? And the opposite of that is a fiat hyperinflation, where the amount of money they're printing, they may be, I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen the numbers, but over the course of a month, they might double the amount of the currency. You know, so they like a 1 month, 100% inflation rate. Such things have happened with hyperinflations. This is just mad. He was saying for gold, it tends to be about 1.5% a year. That is, the total amount of gold goes up by 1.5% each year as there's more gold mining done. Do you guys, I know it's kind of early in the history of Bitcoins, but do you guys have it in a percentage? Like percent of Bitcoins that are added to the stock of Bitcoins? Or do you have a rough guess?
I could tell you exactly.
Okay.
1 second.
Thank you.
Yeah, while he's pulling it up, we just went through an epoch change, and this is why this is a nuanced topic, right? So this is not going to be a simple thing for the viewers to understand, and this is why Bitcoin is a hard thing to understand. Is that, you know, this is just open source code, but in the last epoch, it was the inflation rate was higher than gold, and I believe now it is lower. But Colin's going to verify that.
Now it's currently 2.64. So another interesting way to consider this is that currently, by about this time next year, 90% of all Bitcoin that will ever exist will already have been mined. By 2035, 99% of all Bitcoin that will ever exist will have been fully mined. So this is an extremely currently disinflationary currency. The issuance rate is trending down on a 4-year cycle, but within the next decade will be virtually near zero in terms of, it won't be exactly zero till I think 2130 or something like that, but within it, we only have about a decade to go before the majority that will ever be created will be created.
And there's another view on that as well, that because we all know, I mean, can you verify what the total gold supply is right now, or obviously the total fiat supply? No, you can't. So that's one part of it. We can verify with our full nodes every 10 minutes how many Bitcoins there are. But on top of that, the inflation schedule is known out to of infinity, right? We know what the software tells us what that inflation schedule will be. We know when the last Bitcoin will be mined. So in a sense, there is no inflation. Inflation is unexpected. We know exactly what the schedule will be. And if I buy in right now and I know that there will be more Bitcoins printed in the future, I know exactly what they will be. So I can calculate economically. I can do my own economic calculation and decide whether or not that's good or not.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hopefully less laggy. I tried, it kicked me off and I came back. Okay, so what did I want to say? What were we on? We were on Scarcity.
We just finished up scarcity.
Sorry, I thought there was a point. Okay, well, I'm forgetting. Okay, then established history, that's pretty obvious. Gold has been a money for a long time. Fiat, though, it's hard to see from our presentist point of view, caught up in our moment in time, but it's really quite new in history. Giving it even a C is generous in my view, because you've got thousands and thousands of years of gold being used as money. And you have, 200 years of fiat money or something? I don't know. It's very small relative
And
to
a
the
lot
history
of those fiat currencies failed in very
Yeah.
short amounts of time too.
Right. It's not, what do you call established history? If your history is a history of disaster, does that count? I mean, that's not a great history, right? Yes, we've had fiat currencies. We've also had a lot of fiat currencies go through what Mises called the crack up boom, right? The hyperinflation until basically people just stop using it because it stops serving the function of money.
Another point here, and I think I mentioned it in the last stream, but it's worth noting that things like bimetal pegs are, a form of fiat because that value is determined by
Right.
decree.
Right.
Likewise, the king who clips the coins and then recirculates them at their face value, that is a fiat value. Well, less so of a fiat value, but I think you understand what I'm saying there.
Yep. Okay, and then finally,
Or in the same token. Sorry.
Go
Damn
ahead.
it, I keep doing this. In the same token, the king or the czar, in thinking about Russia at the moment, the czar that says that a copper coin is worth the same as a silver coin. It's just fiat.
Right.
So censorship resistant. I'm going to read this one because I haven't thought about it as much. How difficult is it for an external party, such as a corporation or state, to prevent the owner of the good from keeping or using it? Goods that are censorship resistant are ideal to those living under regimes trying to enforce capital controls or to outlaw various forms of peaceful trade. So this is an interesting topic, not one that we've really hit on the show, but something you see over and over again with regimes that are becoming more authoritarian and even totalitarian is that they start wanting to do capital controls. You guys are probably going to speak more learnedly on this, right? So tell me, why does that happen? Why does the Soviet Union want to control the flow of money?
Well, if they're printing money, right? And I can go, if I'm in the Soviet Union and I know that the Russian government's going to print, billions of dollars, I can just go buy US dollars, right? Because US dollars are more stable, at least relatively speaking. So why wouldn't I just hold those? And then like the guy in Venezuela, transfer back to the rubles when I need to transact, right?
Right.
Well, they need to stop that capital flight. And there's another form of capital flight that makes it really hard to flee the country with your fiat because you start taking a bunch of dollar bills and you can strap them to your chest and but if you have $1 million, let's say you're a millionaire and you have to flee Russia, right? Because Russia's going back to being, I don't know, the USSR again or something. And how do you take $1 million across? You can't do it digitally because they'll stop it from the capital controls. And you could do the same thing with gold, right? If you have $1 million in gold, well, how are you going to flee the country with gold? They'll stop you at the border and they'll say, we're going to need that, right? And with Bitcoin, you can memorize 12 words and you could take billions and trillions of dollars across the border. Well, not trillions yet, but you could take millions of dollars across the border and nobody would know. And they can't prove that you have it, right? That's the interesting is censorship resistance,
And
there's
there's
one last point is that being able to donate to a political party, and I know we're libertarians here, we're maybe borderline ANCAP here, but being able to donate to a political party in a authoritarian regime, if they do that on fiat rails, and if they do that in China or North Korea or something like that, they'll be like, you donated to the wrong one. Not only are we taking all your money off, turning your money, turning it off, you're also going to go into one of these little camps. That's very nice. You'll love it.
And to expand on that, money, the ability to transact, the expression of value is freedom of speech, right? And we're seeing this right now. We're really kind of just seeing the baby steps, but you're seeing people like Alex Jones getting kicked off Twitter, people being deplatformed from Patreon, people having their channels on YouTube demonetized. All of these things where, as Nick Szabo likes to put it, trusted third parties are security holes, because of the nature of Bitcoin being an open and permissionless system, including, so the value of Bitcoin is not just the token, right? The token by itself would be worthless. It'd just be a virtual collectible. It's the fact that the token is built into a distributed global transaction network, a permissionless distributed global transaction network. There's nothing that says, well, there might be laws that say that I'm not allowed to send you 1 Bitcoin rad, but nobody can stop me from doing it. If I have that Bitcoin and I control it, I can send it to you, and they can prosecute me for that after the fact. They can try to deplatform me or whatever after the fact, but they cannot stop that transaction. And we're not, fortunately, at the point in the West where saying the wrong thing on Twitter gets your bank account frozen, but we might not be that far off.
Okay, so let's turn now to how Bitcoin accomplishes this marvelous scorecard here for everything but established history. And I think the main point of established history is that, we talked about money. The definition of money is that it's widely accepted. And so I think that, in my mind, is the main reason why that low grade on established history has any practical meaning. And that is just that not everybody has accepted that Bitcoin is something they might want to hold on to, and therefore you can't use it to exchange with everyone. Ben has already said you can find enough people in pretty much everywhere in the world that it's not too hard to use it to move value around, so to speak. But you can't just use it in every exchange in the way that you can with fiat currency, and the way you at one time could have with silver or gold coins, and now I don't know how many people would just accept those. In the apocalypse scenario, they would. But anyway, so it's got this great score, but how? How does this work? We've been talking around it, and without going into great depth, because it's too deep of a topic. I'm going to try, ready, as a total Bitcoin newbie here, I'm going to try to say what I think, how Bitcoin pulls off all this. Like, how does it actually work such that it has these properties? And then you guys fix what I say wrong. Okay, so basically what you've got is a record of all the Bitcoins, and there's copies of that record, the ledger, right? You've got a ledger of all these Bitcoins, and a bunch of machines on the internet have copies of the ledger. When a change is made on the ledger and enough other machines recognize that change and put it into their copy, at that point, that change is now, blessed by the Bitcoin network or whatever, right? Okay, so far, not too bad, Ben?
Not too bad. Keep going.
Okay, let me keep going. Okay, as they already mentioned, there's a slightly more to it than that, because the ledger is set up in such a way, and this, I don't understand the technical details here. I haven't read Satoshi's paper, but the ledger is set up in such a way that using sort of cryptographic techniques, you can't cheat the ledger. Basically,
okay.
It's
protected.
protected.
So I'll stop you there.
Okay, go.
I'll stop you there. So you said the Bitcoin network anoints this new information and everybody adopts it, right? So the process you're describing, actually, you need to understand a little bit about mining in order to understand that. That mining is a bunch of computers trying to guess a lot of numbers until they find a number that fits a specific specification. So they're kind of multiplying random numbers by the information that will get loaded into the ledger. And they're trying a bunch of things until they find one that fits this definition. And once they do that and they prove that they've done it before anybody else, then everybody accepts that. That's the acceptance, right? So that there is this real world work that has to happen, guessing trillions of numbers, really trillions of numbers per second. The whole network is guessing more than that. It's in the peta, I think, quadrillions of numbers per second or per every 10 minutes. And that lottery system that is created by this competition is what decides that no single party can always be able to, the person that's writing the ledger, otherwise that introduces censorship. Because if I'm the only one that can write the ledger, well, I can just say, oh, well, I'm not going to include your transaction. But because there's this competition and there's the incentive, and I talked about the blockchains earlier, there's an incentive to do the mining, and that's the subsidy, right? Which is the new Bitcoins that are being discovered, plus the fees. And as the subsidy goes down, as we stop inflating the supply, the fees have already started to come up to kind of support that. And we're seeing that happen slowly. So that I think it's a key piece to understand there.
So what happens in 10 years when, the inflation rate, the growth of the money supply growth of Bitcoins is very low? How does the system keep working at that point?
The idea, like he said, was that the miner fees, transaction fees. Make no mistake, Bitcoin.
Okay.
Bitcoin is a network at the base layer, is a network of security assurance. It is designed to be extremely expensive because security assurance is extremely expensive. A guy named Nick Carter wrote a really good article on this. I believe it's called It's the Security Assurance Stupid or something like that.
Yeah.
And he basically talks about how, you're never going to want to use Bitcoin to buy coffee or a pair of shoes, or, you can right now because we still have security subsidy in place via the inflation of the Bitcoin token. But, in 10 years, that paradigm is going to move more towards transaction fees, which is fees paid for that security assurance. But if you're making something like a coffee payment, that's going to be done at higher layers, where security assurance is not as necessary.
Right, because you don't need the world's largest computing network and guessing trillions and trillions of things to secure the coffee payment, because it's not as important.
Would it by any chance be unpacking Bitcoin's assurances,
No.
disaggregating the system's guarantees?
Nick Carter, N-I-C Carter.
I've got the right name.
It's
but I'm not finding I got it. It's the settlement assurance.
Yes, that's right.
It's on his Medium. I was on the right Medium blog, but the wrong post.
Fantastic article. He has another one that I think is really important to understand for the viewers that are trying to understand Bitcoin. And the other article is called Bitcoin Bites the Bullet. And the point of the article is that Bitcoin is ugly. It's disgusting. It's this giant mess of all these different contraptions, and it takes all these hundreds of thousands of computers and wastes all this energy, quote unquote wastes. It's hard to understand. It uses all these cryptography, and it's I can lose my Bitcoin by losing this privacy. But there's really, really important reasons why every single one of these decisions were made. It's and that's why the altcoin of the day that's saying, oh, I'm like Bitcoin, but I'm better. It doesn't understand these two articles because these things matter. And really what you have to understand that Bitcoin is trying to do is it's trying to disintermediate central banking, which is essentially a cartel that has the world in a system of quasi-slavery, where they're just leeching our wealth off, and where the wealthy benefit by holding the assets, and blah 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 blah. So that is huge.
I've shared both those articles to the chat. Thank you, Mad Merc.
Thank you. Before we get too far off into the weeds and everything, let's do three things. Firstly, let's address Mises's regression theorem. 2, deflation. I saw you were tweeting about this a little bit back, Ben, about deflation and Bitcoin and technological deflation. And 3, let's get on to the special surprise we have, Radlid, after we address those two things, because we're starting to run a little bit long on time.
That's for sure. Okay, regression theorem briefly. Oh, well, let me define it, and then you guys explain how we think about it with Bitcoin. Mises's regression theorem, I forget if we talked about it last time, is solving a problem in theoretical monetary economics, which is simply if how do you explain the price of money? You explain the price of money today in part based on the price of the money yesterday. Well, this seems like an infinite regression, right? Well, you just go back and back and back, and Mises says, no, the regression stops at a certain point. The point at which it stops is where the money's not being used as money. It's just a commodity, right? You're exchanging it as a commodity, and then eventually it rises as to be a, but that's sort of a gradual process, and you can actually trace it back to where somebody just wanted that commodity. So it had value. So the mystery for people who knew the regression theorem when Bitcoin came along was, well, but where's that original point where it was a commodity and had value? And so go ahead, guys.
Well, I don't think that we've ever, first of all, the information age has changed a lot of things, right? Information moves much more quickly than ever before. And I mean, within major orders of magnitude, information moves more quickly today than ever before. So to experience the monetization of a new thing in the information age is obviously unprecedented. And don't get me wrong, I'm a thorough Austrian. I am a huge proponent of Mises, a huge proponent of Rothbard, and I swear by just about everything that they had to say. However, Bitcoin wasn't around when Mises wrote about the regression theorem. The internet wasn't around when Mises wrote about the regression theorem. And in a lot of ways, the majority of our modern communication technologies were not around when Mises wrote about the regression theorem. And that's not to say that I think that Mises was wrong, so much as it is that this thing is unlike anything that has ever happened before. We are witnessing the monetization of a new asset happening in real time at an exponential pace on a global communication transactional network. That is unprecedented. And to some degree, I actually argue here that the space on a limited in size distributed global ledger is a commodity.
So the response I've heard is that it goes back to essentially someone valuing Bitcoin for their own personal subjective reasons having to do with, I mean, who knows what their value, their thinking was, but maybe it was speculative, I think is going to be something. Or go ahead.
I've heard that original value could be disrupting central banking. That was the value, right?
Yeah.
To restore sound money in the world. Yes.
The possible promise of
potentially, yes.
Yeah.
And Nick Szabo talks about this too in his book, or in his essay, "The Origins of Money: Shelling Out," where he talks about the processes that things go through in the regression theorem, where something starts out as a collectible. And in a lot of sense, that's what Bitcoin was in the early days. And then people realized, hey, this is uncensorable money. And they, like Ben said, were oftentimes under the mistaken impression that it was also anonymous. And we're using it to transact for things like, online gambling, because this was back when online gambling was under heavy duress from governments shutting it down in America, and, online drug trade, Silk Road, all of those types of things that happened. And it was sort of an evolution beyond collectibles. I'm sure people have all heard of the guy who spent 10,000 Bitcoin on a pizza. That was the first Bitcoin transaction that the public knows about, where Bitcoin was exchanged for value rather than just being a collectible on someone's computer.
Right. Okay, so let's turn into deflation real quick. I have to, as often as I can, deflation comes up, I got to bring this in that I think Mark Thornton came up with. a populatorismos-phobia. Anyway, something like that. It's fear of deflation.
Oh, really? Oh, I gotta memorize that.
Yeah,
man.
You can find it from Thornton. Yeah, so people are afraid of deflation, and in my view, this is the result of propaganda.
Yes,
because
they're terrified.
Yeah, what the Austrians teach is that deflation is a gentle deflation is, in fact, exactly what you want to see in a productive economy. That your money becomes worth more. Yeah, that's the natural state of things. Of course, we've seen drastic deflations, and because of booms and busts and stuff like that, and that has people scared. But that shouldn't make you afraid of deflation, because deflation is healthy, it's normal. So that's my introduction to deflation. Very quick. Deflation of Bitcoin. Go.
No, I 100% agree with you that the problem that everyone will point to when they're scared of deflation, every single Keynesian that you talk to, well, but what about when 1929 happened? And that, as just stipulated, was a hyper deflationary event that was unexpected in nature, right? inflation is always unexpected. That is the problem with inflation. If it's not unexpected, you can hedge for it, and you can do your economic calculations. Deflation, on the other hand, is, as you say, the very desire, the very goal of society is to make things cheaper. Right? Like look around,
Right.
and you can go all the way back to agrarian societies, and then one day somebody put a wheel in front of an ox, or behind an ox with a rope around it, and they're like, wow, we can make more fields now and make more food. And guess what happened? Society exploded and started getting bigger and bigger, and because the real cost of that thing declined. And what we want is a money that will accurately reflect the real costs of things by being as unchanging as possible. It's not about It's not about.
We want to see gains. We want to see gains in productivity show up in our money.
Yes, 100%.
And where a lot of people run into problems here is they confuse price inflation with monetary inflation. People will look at the markets today and say, there's no inflation. There's no inflation. It doesn't matter how much QE they do. It doesn't matter how much money they print. There's no inflation. It's ridiculous because, first of all, if you look at it on more than just a year-over-year basis, go back in time and you'll see that things have absolutely gotten a whole heck of a lot more expensive. And, Ben and I talk a lot about the majority of the inflation that you see in the West is asset inflation, less so commodity inflation, right? Because there's tons of monetary inflation. Just this past year alone has been unprecedented in terms of monetary inflation. But the price inflation of things like commodities is very small. Commodities are in a bull market right now for the first time in like forever. And they're still just coming back to like their local top from like 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. So we're actually seeing deflation in commodities on a long-term basis. And it's because of this concept that we're saying it doesn't matter how much the monetary inflation is, because our technology at producing these goods and services has been so good in spite of the monetary inflation, which is very destructive and very damaging to our economic processes.
Okay, so let's keep it moving. What's your estimate, Ben, on doing this Bitcoin demo?
Oh, I think we should do it.
Like, it's not 30 minutes, it's less?
No, man.
Oh, okay.
No.
Awesome. Okay, well,
Let's get her done.
let's see. What, Medmer?
He said, let's get her
Let's
done.
get it done. Let's wrap. Let's get her done. Let's get it done.
Okay. I am going to show you my cool new thing I figured out to do. Get ready, folks. Whoop. Okay. This is my iPhone. Look at that. Pretty cool, eh? Let's see. In my recently purchased, I didn't want to hide too much,
Okay.
So in my recently purchased, all I've done is I've downloaded 2 apps that Ben told me to download. That's it. That's the only trick up my sleeve. These were free. That should be mentioned. These were free. And in fact, Ben, if you would have a chance to, you can't do that. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to try to put the links to these. These are the iPhone versions, but there's versions for other platforms.
I'll
These
just
are the
add
iPhone
one thing before we start.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll just add one thing before we start. PlayStation's better. Just saying. Should move over to a PlayStation rather than.
Oh, I don't have Xbox. That's just, we're a Minecraft family, and we don't even use any of that stuff. They just make you get an Xbox ID. Anyway, my 5-year-old twins are playing Minecraft, and they're actually pretty good at it. My redheaded twin girls, and I'm like, how do I monetize this? I mean, come on, that is so cute. Okay. So Blue Wallet and Strike are the apps on the screen that we're going to do. So what do we do first, Ben?
So we're going to go to Strike.
Okay.
So the caveat here, guys, is that you should do your own research on these things. And don't trust us. Don't trust Verify is the creed of the Bitcoiners. But these are 2 that we are relatively confident in, that are relatively good places to move a little bit of money around. So Strike, we're going to hit Get Started here. And at some point, he's going to have to hide the screen unless he wants to dox these things. So he might be willing to type his email address in here.
Let's see. Here we go. Okay.
Email.
All right.
And then after that, you'll probably need your phone number as well. So the reason that he has to do this is because he's going to use the fiat rails to get the fiat money in there, because he's going to purchase some Bitcoin, and he has to provide his KYC, his know your customer information.
Yeah, and that's a law or something.
Yes, and it's all around the world. You can't move money around digitally without putting your KYC in, unless you have a cool new digital money, of course.
Right, you can't move.
But you got to get it first. You got to get it first.
You can't move fiat currency.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see.
And there are other ways
to.
There are other ways to get
go
Bitcoin,
ahead.
by the way. I was just going to say there's other ways to get Bitcoin. You don't have to buy it on one of these regular exchanges, but they get more and more nuanced as you go on. So do your own research. Or reach out to one of us on Twitter if you want.
Okay. So I'm actually having to put in my name, my phone number, scary stuff.
Yep. But this is the same type of stuff you'd have to put into PayPal or Venmo or Cash App or even your bank if you're opening up a bank account, right? So we're moving around money. That's why.
Okay, they sent me a verification code through email, and then I'm doing a verification code through text message to my phone. What happened? I said, oh, verification successful. Okay, so I can share the screen again, right? Because all I see is pay request, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think you'll need a card too.
Say it again?
You'll need to add a card in order to put money on it.
Okay. How do I do that? Let's see. Deposit, withdraw. Sorry.
So if you hit deposit.
Payment methods. Methods.
There you go.
Okay.
So we'll also say here that with this part of it, we're buying the Bitcoin with fiat, right? So obviously he needs to do all this KYC. But once you have Bitcoin into a wallet, which this thing does have a wallet in it, but this one in particular holds dollars. Actually, it doesn't hold Bitcoin. You're not buying Bitcoin yet. It's only when you send it from this app that it becomes Bitcoin. It's kind of
at this point, it's the moral equivalent of just Venmo or PayPal.
Yes, for sure. But with a twist.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. It's not only that.
Yep. And as you go and type in your card information there, another thing I would like to say here is that folks, we really recommend you use open source software. You can get wallets on your computer, but be aware that phones are relatively locked down and generally they tend to have less malware and spyware and all that stuff on them. They're generally okay to keep a small amount of Bitcoin in, but try to use open source software. And the other caveat there is that you can't really use open source software on like an iPhone, for example, because you can't verify that the same thing that's on their GitHub page is the same thing you're getting on your phone. When you download open source software on like a Linux machine, for example, and you build it from source, it's exactly the same code. And the reason what we're saying about open source is that we can spot errors. We can spot some kind of malicious thing. Not that wallets that like get hacked all the time or exit scammed, but it's all about just protecting yourself into the future and trying to take some sovereignty over your own assets here.
Right. Is there a place you would recommend to start research at? Just for all of our users, like, is there a website that aggregates a lot of this information that they can quickly source through? Because it's a little bit intimidating if you're new to all of this sort of concepts to then go and research this stuff and then maybe be tricked.
Yeah, there's a good one. Bitcoin.page, I believe, is Jameson Lopp's list of Bitcoin resources. There's a ton in there. That's a good place to start. If you want to learn more about how Bitcoin works and why it's important, I would recommend Dare Gigi's Bitcoin resources, which we can share that link afterward in the chat. Did you get all set up there, Rad?
No, I think we're going to have to try a backup plan because I have to authenticate with my bank. It only supports bank accounts, and
oh, really? Okay, I thought it did a card.
It says it's not available right now or something. So maybe they lost their They got choke pointed, if you know about Operation Choke Point.
Yeah. Well, the backup plan is that I can send you some Bitcoin. And for this, we don't need any KYC, which is kind of cool.
Right. Okay. Well, that's okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It just keeps asking me the verification questions for my bank and processes, and then asks me another one. Yeah, I'm just stuck. Oh, bummer. Okay. So let's go then to
Blue Wallet.
Okay, so I'll share my screen again and show what I'm doing. The fun of demos. Okay.
Do you have Discord on your phone, Red?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, cool. Perfect.
Okay, so what do I do?
So you're going to hit add wallet.
Add now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Bitcoin.
Just type.
Yep.
And I put a name.
Yep, doesn't matter. My first wallet's fine.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so now, so now we messed up already. So this is the part where you have to write these words down, right? So this is really important.
Should I start over?
Yeah, I think we can go back and hopefully get new words.
Okay, well, explain what happened that was bad.
So this is the seed. This is the backup of your entire wallet, right? And if anybody has these words, they can basically access all your funds, right?
Okay.
So I think
I need to do plus wallet.
I think you'll have to.
Okay, and this time
I think this will actually be linked to that same seed. You might have to delete this thing and start over again. So we didn't test this, folks, ahead of time. We wanted to do it all live. You hit the dots in the upper right. See if you can kind of delete this thing.
This show is authentic, if nothing else. We are very raw.
Advanced.
Right? You can trust us.
Lumberg said he wrote it down for you, Red. Don't worry.
Thank you. Yeah. So what do you mean? When I create a new wallet, it's not going to do a new thing?
No, you'd have to probably delete this. And
well, let me try. If I do it,
I think it's going to be linked to that same seed is the problem. Yeah, I almost had to do that off camera. I didn't know when it was going to come up.
It said provide entropy via dice rolls. Would that help?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Because that'll generate something.
No, you don't want to. You don't want to get into all that. Yeah, he's going to have to get out dice and roll them.
Oh, I'm looking at new words on the screen now.
They're different. Perfect. That's all we need. Okay.
Okay. Cool. So I'm going to just save those.
Yeah, you can just take a screenshot for now, and we would recommend very, very, very urgently that you do not ever take a screenshot of those words because it's super insecure. And again, if anybody ever has those words, that they can take all your money, right? But just for now, just for the demonstration purposes of this wallet, that's what we're going to do.
You can think of that like a password to your Bitcoin.
Right. Yep. Okay. So I wrote this down. Okay. Here we go. Oh, I wish I had named it because now I got to figure out which was which.
Well, the first one should have been my first wallet, right?
No, I just didn't put a name. So let's see. I'm going to.
It'll probably be the one to the right, not the first one. The one to the right.
Can I delete it? Yeah, I'm deleting the one on the left.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen again now.
Yep, now we're good.
Okay. So
now
I have my wallet.
So go in there, and what we're going to do is receive some Bitcoin, right?
Okay.
So yes, you have. You've saved your backup phrase.
Now there's nothing insecure about me sharing this, right?
Nope, we're good now. So I would hit just ask me later or something. Don't worry about it. So now, what is this here? This is a Bitcoin address, right? So what you need to do is send this to me, or otherwise I have to type all that stuff. But actually, I think I can just send. So wait, keep that on the screen. What I'm going to do from my phone, I'm going to send using that QR code that's on the screen. So it already popped up and I can see it here. So I'm going to send him, how much am I going to send? Where it doesn't say how much. Here we go. We're going to send you $5 worth of Bitcoin.
Oh, thank you.
Not $5. Not 5 Bitcoin. That would be $95,000.
If you want to, man, it's all on you. I mean,
no. We're gonna send $5.
Pay attention to the unit.
So
Very-
now
very-
watch very carefully. I'm going to send it
Yeah.
right now.
Okay.
Okay. I can't see. You can't see that, so don't worry about it.
Do I have to leave this screen or?
No, you could leave it here.
Okay.
No, actually, it may not show that right away. So if you hit
Yeah,
X,
There you go.
within a few seconds, this should show up. Now, this isn't confirmed yet, but what happens is the idea that the transaction is going to go out gets onto the network before it's confirmed.
Yeah, and Mad Mercenary had a great idea, which is that the wallet we set up here will be a for the show, so we can receive have an alternative way to receive donations, because there are people who will not, they're too much into security. They will not reveal the details that would need to be revealed to be able to send us a super chat, maybe even not a subscribe star, but they're comfortable sending a little bit of Bitcoin because they've got that pseudonymous security, right?
If you kind of pull down like the rubber band type of thing, it might actually show up there, because it should already kind of be on.
There we go.
Boom.
Okay,
so
right.
you
let's
have
talk about what we're saying.
0.0002 Bitcoin now.
Right. Okay.
An alternative way to
the-
express that is 25,609 Satoshis.
Okay, because that's where people are operating pretty much at this point, is down at that unit. Okay, so on the right in green, we have the amount of Bitcoin. On the left, it says pending. What does that mean?
Yep. So it hasn't been confirmed. So remember how we were saying that miners are guessing all those things, and what happens is this transaction right now is in this pool of transactions that could go into a block. It hasn't gone into a block yet. Most wallets will show you that you basically already have this money, because it's it's extremely unlikely that you won't eventually get it, right? It won't eventually go into a block. It does depend on like how big the fee is, how long it will take. So that's part of it too. It's again, this stuff is a little bit nuanced.
It has a practical impact, right? Because I assume that while it's pending, you can't do anything with it yet.
No, so that's not. So that no. So this is the problem. So Ben can still spend that Bitcoin until it gets included in a block. He can do what's called a replace child by parent transaction, where he basically takes that Bitcoin that he's already quote unquote sent you and spend it again, but actually send it to someone else using a higher fee, meaning that that second transaction would get included and not the one he already sent you. So it's not good practice to assume that you already have that Bitcoin until it's been received, because Ben is still capable of doing what's called double spending it.
Right, which doesn't really serve, it doesn't do the inflationary thing, right? We don't have two people, well, very temporarily, you have two people who think they own it, right?
Right, but you'll never receive it in that case.
That gets resolved as soon as the ledgers are reconciled, or whatever you call it. And now there's only one owner of that Bitcoin.
Correct.
The second one in this case.
Right. But if you go back to the coffee example, let's say you were a merchant accepting this for a cup of coffee. How often does somebody scam you for a cup of coffee over like $2, right? So like probably you can accept a zero confirmation payment. If you're buying a car, however, or if you're accepting payment for a car, I would wait more than one confirmation. I'd wait 2 or 3 or 4, because then there's more of that computing power that's stacked upon those transactions that it's almost impossible to undo.
And likewise with higher layers like Lightning, that this transaction can happen instantly, and also pretty close to for free, which is very interesting and very exciting.
Yes, and you can just, by the way, this wallet has Lightning in it. You could just open another wallet that's Lightning instead of Bitcoin, and then you can send little itty bitty sats around for almost nothing.
Okay, so when would you expect it to go from pending to confirmed or whatever?
Probabilistically in the next 10 minutes.
Right. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Madmer.
Sorry, can you just quickly explain the difference between Lightning and Bitcoin, just briefly?
Yeah, I could try. It's so basically it's a way of spending Bitcoin into an agreement, a contract between two people that in order to actually move it around again on the Bitcoin chain, you have to kind of agree with that person, because you're kind of and that transaction was confirmed already. If you do that rubber band thing again, it should show up as confirmed. So once you have it locked up into this contract, though, you can kind of you can kind of move it back and forth between each other in little pieces, but not actually send that transaction to the blockchain. Using a lot of really interesting cryptography, you can kind of like think about it like a bar tab, where if I go to a bar and I say, hey, here's $10. That's kind of, that $10 doesn't now exist in my wallet or in your wallet. It exists between us, right? In this kind of digital state where I buy my first beer for $1. It's a very cheap beer. And then I later want to buy another beer. And so I bought 2 beers. And now I would like to close out my tab. We're going to close out the tab. I'm going to get $8 back, and you're going to get your $2 as the merchant, and everything's good. But the Lightning Network is far more than just between 2 people, because I can kind of pay through RAD to somebody else, and that person can pay through somebody else using an onion routed network like the Tor browser. And you can pay everybody on the network just by establishing 1 or 2 connections. And this wallet here will actually hide all this from you, and it just looks like you're sending back going around.
The most interesting and important thing about Lightning is that it settles back to the base layer of Bitcoin. So you're never stuck with Lightning Bitcoin without the ability to redeem it as actual BTC on the Bitcoin network. It can be settled out to the Bitcoin network at any time by either participant in those quote unquote channels between each other.
Rad's just amazed that he's gotten this Bitcoin now. Look at him.
So this particular app is called Blue Wallet, correct?
Yep. Yes.
But we encourage people to do your own research, try and find the best app that for your purposes. Now, just quick information: is this particular app, exclusive to the United States alone? Because I know that I believe you three are all in the United States.
So that would depend on the app stores and your jurisdictions. If you want to do these things on phones, I would recommend Android. There's a lot more ways to install things without Big Daddy phone maker to control whether you can. This stuff is open source software, right? So if you're running into one of these roadblocks, it's probably because you're using the wrong system. If you can install it on a computer. You can also get hardware wallets. You can use Bitcoin Core directly on an offline computer. It really depends on how much security you really need. If you're storing millions of dollars of Bitcoin, you're going to want to think about these things. If you're storing $10 or $5 that I just sent Rad, it's probably not a big deal, right?
Right. Okay.
I think about the mobile wallets that I have on my phone is kind of what I would carry around in cash in my actual wallet, right? Because somebody can come up to me on the street and bonk me on the head and take, even if I have $200, and I'll still carry around $100 or whatever, because if I lose $100, it doesn't change my life, right? Like I'm not gonna, go bankrupt. So you have to think about it almost like a checking account versus a savings account. There's a lot of analogies you can use to try to understand these things, but I would recommend using more than one wallet and learning about open source. And there's another wallet that I would recommend, maybe called Blockstream Green, which is pretty good. There's a lot of good wallets.
A really great way to start, if you're just interested in getting your feet wet and not storing, thousands of dollars, is a mobile wallet like what Rad has here, but preferably one like an older one that you have laying around at home that you don't use anymore, that's no longer connected to the cell network, that you only connect via Wi-Fi, because that's a much more secure way of using the device, because cell networks are prone to lots of spoofing and those types of things, but the Wi-Fi connection is generally much more secure.
Okay, so just to finish our demo, it says 2 minutes ago. That's out of date. But confirmation 1, that means there's been, I guess, 1 node in the network that acknowledges that this is legit.
No. All of the nodes in the network, every single node in the network, all 80,000 of them now have this transaction in their mempool.
Oh, so what does the 1 mean?
1 block. You're 1 block deep. So it's the chain of blocks, and each block has a 10,000 or 5,000 transactions in it. So yours was included in that block. You were lucky enough to get your transaction included in that block because the fee was high enough. So the next block that comes down, it gets exponentially harder to rewrite the chain. If you had like lots and lots of hashing power and you could do this. Yeah, which this is what the 51% attack is about, right? These things also almost never happen, but it's game theoretically. You need to understand these things, how the system works. So if you had 3 or 4 of these things, it's almost impossible to rewrite the network because of the things at play.
Okay, so let's move towards wrapping this up. We only have one super chat, I think, so I'll read that out, and it's from from Lumberg. He says BTC, that's short for Bitcoin, right? BTC is currently not useful as a currency due to its volatility. When do you expect it to settle in line, for example, with gold? When can I fix a SYR contract? I don't know what that means.
5 year.
5 years. Sorry, 5 year contract. When can I fix a 5 year contract? Okay, yeah. So volatility. Boy, I'd love to have a chart against. Well, gold would be better, really, but
I have a good one for this, I think.
Okay. If you can send me a link, I can. Or you can just share it.
Can I share my screen real quickly?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up really quickly here. Give me 10 seconds here. So the idea that Bitcoin is being monetized means that right now it's a proto money. It's a quasi money, right? So I think this will do it. Yes, it's loading. So in this stage, it needs volatility to go from 0 to being globally monetized, right? That you can't get from 0 to a global liquidity, a multi-trillion-dollar market cap without volatility. You have to. The volatility is it acquiring that that premium, the monetary premium. So I'm sharing. I'm going to your entire screen's fine. Okay, I'm new to this. Hold on. So you guys can see this now, I think.
Sharing now. Okay. Yep.
So this was made by this guy named Murad, who's had a really good idea about this is like kind of the curve of how Bitcoin could be adopted. And that this was made a few years ago. So that little yellow star that says we are here, we might be like here now or something, right? We're not at reliable store of value yet, but we are seeing greater perceived safety. We are seeing greater education and understanding. We are seeing greater centralization, greater custodial solutions. We're seeing greater acceptance in the market. We're seeing like companies like MicroStrategy putting $500 million into it because they're worried about their dollars inflating. You're seeing Druckenmiller. We're seeing Paul Tudor Jones. The list goes on of this slow acceptance of us moving towards possibly being a money.
I'm happy that ANCAPs are called out here, and I just want to say, uh-oh, I'm not hearing Ben. I'm seeing his mouth move.
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, I see. It's a lag thing or something. Yeah, I was just saying that ANCAPs are specifically named on there, so that's nice because don't say we never did anything for you. Yeah, but anyway, the volatility, basically, if you look for Bitcoin against US gold dollars or Bitcoin against gold, it's not fair to say it's all over the place, right? I mean, yes, it's quite volatile, but it's not like Bitcoin drops to 0 or close to it, right?
Right.
It's within a band.
Have you seen the logarithmic chart?
Well, I know. I mean, if you can have a chart, show us a chart of Bitcoin against other things. I think that would be, against US dollars or whatever.
No,
that would be helpful, I think.
it's just so it's against dollars, but it's on a long-term scale. Sorry, a little bit of a overlap there. Let me just do this really quickly.
And again, it's worth pointing out that
so
this is the monetization of it.
Term scale.
Lag.
The price.
Okay, I'm not seeing it yet.
Go ahead.
Okay, there we
go. Oh, we got some lag, man. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so on a logarithmic scale, which is different than a linear scale. On a linear scale, you can see the price just kind of does nothing for like 8 years, and then there's this giant spike in 2017, and then it looks like it kind of crashed back down. But on a logarithmic scale, where if you look over here, it's 0.1, 1, and then 10, and then 100, and then 1,000. It's exponential scale, which is really the way that they view long-term stock charts anyway. Because if not, then all of this price information disappears. This is a more, it's a different perspective on viewing that quote volatility. That it certainly seems like it's trending in the positive direction, if you will.
And if you look at this on the long-term scale here, generally anytime you've bought, anybody who's bought Bitcoin, as long as they're still holding it today, has been profitable, with the exception of maybe like one day in 2018, in the beginning of 2018. If you bought that day, just hold on for a few more weeks. But I probably don't need to tell you that if you're still around and you bought that day. But it's generally people are fine with volatility as long as it's volatility to the upside. So if you have a little bit of patience, again, remember we're watching the monetization of a completely new asset happen in real time at an exponential rate. So you got to be willing to have a little patience here, and I don't think you're going to be using your Bitcoin to go buy shoes anytime soon, unless that's really, really what you want to do. So this is one of those things where you kind of want to get a little bit. You want to spend time increasing your knowledge and your understanding. You want to look at your security practices. And you want to get a little bit, and you want to just hold on to it and maybe add to it as you start to understand it more, as your conviction in it grows, and watch the monetization event happen in real time, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, so this is what I was trying to say about volatility. Let's put it in perspective. There's never a day where you would buy it and then regret it if you were able to be a little bit patient. That's what you were referring to, right, Colin?
Exactly.
Right. That is, it doesn't like drop to zero. It's the long run trend is pretty clear at this point. It's gonna eventually get less volatile, and it's gonna settle at a price that's probably above what it is right now. Right? That's what we're headed towards. Mad Merc, go ahead.
I was about to say, Bitcoin's at a very high point right now, and we saw that it goes up very sharply in a very short amount of time, and it comes back down very sharply in a very short amount of time. At the moment, we're at a very high area, so I don't want to make recommendations, but in my mind, what's going to happen is that this is going to come down shortly or within the next couple months or something, and then that's a good time to buy, because obviously, buy low, sell high, that sort of basic knowledge.
We would probably recommend, before you do that, to check out, first of all, to understand the halving schedule, which we haven't even talked about here, really. We've only briefly kind of alluded to it. The inflation schedule itself is on a 4-year schedule where the amount of Bitcoins that the miners are finding is cut in half every 4 years. And it tends to make these kind of boom and bust cycles that we saw culminate in 2017 was the end of a large one. And what you were saying is that it's up high again. It's kind of, if you look at these cycles, they are almost fractal in nature, where they look the same, but exponentially larger each time, or maybe not exponentially, but significantly larger each time. So there's a gentleman named 100 trillion USD on Twitter, at 100 trillion USD, who has a stock to flow model, which, by the way, models are wrong. And sometimes they're useful, sometimes, but all models are wrong. But that kind of tries to understand what's happening in this process. And I actually, if you were to ask me, my speculation, and it's wild speculation, is that it's going to go much higher before a much larger crash. The next crash will be probably $50,000, but if it gets up over $100,000, then that $50,000, it will come back down to 50, and everyone will say, "Oh, Bitcoin died again; it crashed down 50%." But we'd be much higher than we are today. So, you can't tell the future. The model doesn't work because you don't know what people's demand are. You only know the supply side, but it could be a useful economic tool for your calculation.
Okay, well, let's move towards wrapping it up. Any last thoughts?
Well, I was going to take the devil advocate position that we talked about in the private discussion and say, what do you say to, well-meaning people such as Peter Schiff, who, by the way, we're not throwing shade at Peter Schiff at all. He's a very sound guy on economics, and he's done a lot of work in pushing for Austrian economics around the world. So please don't take this as us throwing shade at him. But what would you say to someone like Peter Schiff, who is maybe not anti-Bitcoin, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but who's very skeptical of Bitcoin, who sees it as merely, I believe he put it in his words, merely a speculative asset?
I think Peter Schiff's arguments are very flimsy, and I think that they're not based in. I think Peter Schiff is smarter than he lets on, and I think that Peter Schiff is playing a character. I think that Peter Schiff's business interests are aligned with selling gold. And I think that Peter Schiff has figured out that by criticizing Bitcoin, he can generate a lot of attention for himself. That's good for his bottom line. Whether or not Peter Schiff actually understands Bitcoin, I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I could tell you that a lot of the arguments that he presents are very flimsy and not convincing. There's a lot of Ben and I had a private conversation with someone not too long ago. He said he was turned off from Bitcoin because it was so tribal in nature. And I think it is true. It is tribal, but if you really get to know some of the people involved in it, they're tribal because they've done their homework and have been unable to come up with criticisms that have been able to convince them otherwise that this is not a monetization event of a better money happening in real time. The thing that Peter Schiff harps on the most is that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. And anybody who's read Mises should know that there's no such thing as intrinsic value, that everything value is always subjective because something is only ever worth what another is willing to pay for it at a given moment in time.
Okay, well, let's stop there then, if that's all right, Mad Merc. We've run quite long. And I
Totally.
appreciate Colin and Ben taking the time with us both on this episode and the last one to really lay it out carefully with placing Bitcoin in the context of historic money. I think is probably the right way to begin thinking about this, right? Because like you're saying, it's at some point. I mean, when people use money, they don't understand how it works, right? And when people use fiat or they use silver or gold in the past, they couldn't necessarily give you like a whole theory of like, why do we even accept money, right? And we don't need for everyone to understand all this for Bitcoin to get wider and wider adoption. They just need to recognize
the market.
They just need to recognize that if I hold on to some Bitcoin, I can use it and it retains value, and right?
Yeah, the meme we have is number go up, which is just like the meme you guys have about line go up. But the Bitcoiners use this as, yes, exactly, that most people probably won't dig into the Austrian economics and Mangorian or origins of money and all these things, but they will see the number go up, the line go up on the screen, and they're like, oh, I might want that, And it goes up because of the scarcity and because of the other qualities of people using it, all these things.
Right. And this whole thing of you're trying to do something with somebody internationally, and it's just, oh, I can just send Bitcoin, and it's like no muss, no fuss, right? I mean,
we ran into it with the demo. We couldn't even get the fiat rails to work, but we could do was open up Bitcoin, and it works, right? There's your example.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to pay somebody, like in our YouTube community, right? You pay somebody to do some artwork for your show or something like that, and who knows where they are, Romania or India or something like that. You just send them a little Bitcoin. Boom. So easy. So easy.
They are, or who they are.
Right. Yeah.
Now, can we that little QRF code? Can we put that in like a description, like a show description, and people could just send it, copy that link, and then send us all money and donations if they were so inclined?
Probably
correct.
You absolutely
we
can.
just use the hash, right?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
Either one.
Generally, that's not the best privacy practice to reuse the same address. Just for the listeners, just like so you guys know, maybe look into it. If it's going to become like a personal wallet for you, you might want to consider not doing that. But as far as like donations for your show go, it's fine.
100%.
So I'm sorry. So it is fine as
Mhm.
far as
Yes.
donations to the
It's
show.
not a best practice in terms of privacy, but yes, it will absolutely
we
work.
might talk about this. We might talk about this off air, Red Lib, as to what we're going to do with that. But yeah,
Yeah,
we're
but
gonna.
for now, it would totally work. You can put the picture of that QR code, and that QR code is just code that the machine will translate into the address that's below it, which is that long string of numbers and letters. That's the address, and the QR code just is the same thing as the address, just the machine readable version.
Right. Okay. Anyway, yeah, we'll figure it out. Okay. Well, thanks very much, gentlemen. And Mad Merc, did you miss your class or what happened here?
Oh, I just unmuted myself. Sorry. Yeah, it's a socialist anyway. It's the same socialist issue. So
You keep skipping. Well, I'm
yeah, I
trying,
do,
we're
because
trying to do it
I
so that
don't-
we don't have to skip.
I don't particularly want to learn about how, and I kid you not, this is what she said. We have the Reserve Bank of Australia (RBA) here as our central bank, and I kid you not, she said in one of our classes, the Reserve Bank of Australia knows everything that there needs to know about the financial system, and they are incredibly good. They are incredibly good at creating models for the supply and the retraction of money. I am
Wow.
not kidding, and I just had to leave. It was just so.
How much you paying for that education, Mark?
Yeah.
Too much.
Ouch.
Too much.
Pay in fiat. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We caught super chats. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.